Right, hello and welcome to another tutorial in Maya. It is time to take a look at an underwater particle effect, or creating an nCloth and nParticle type of effect. So this is really cool because it's underwater for one, and it's also moving and simulated. Now it doesn't look like too much there, but as I work on this, you want to sort of conceive an effect, and this is in sort of like particles coming in, taking over a blob underwater, and it could be just about anything. But the point here is to start out with an object that is an nCloth object, and it has motion to it and some particles that are attracted to that object, and these are nParticles. And they work as a system. So this is basically setting up a goal, where the goal is for the particles to come and attach themselves to the blob. So no big deal there. I'm in Mental Ray and I've got some production settings on, so you might want to do that. I'm not going to be doing a lot of rendering necessarily, but you know, this is just sort of a starting point. Now, these particles, you might ask yourself, well, yeah, they're just, you know, round spheres, and okay, but later these are going to be replaced with some other sort of creepy creature that'll sort of come onto here, and this will, you know, be eaten up or absorbed or whatever. But really the point is to get the simulation started and being able to control your particles and being able to control your nCloth object. So let's take a look at how to do that. I'm going to come over here and sort of rewind to the beginning and show you what the simulation sort of looks like. I do have the underwater ocean scene open, so I'm starting with an underwater ocean scene preset, and there's a whole tutorial on that, so you can catch that one. But in this case, I'm just sort of building this thing. All right, and you can see where the underwater scene has a camera and some other stuff in here, and that's not really that important at the moment. I've placed a spotlight overhead here, and I've changed the shading on the particles a little bit. So, you know, my particle shape looks like this now for its color. So that's about all I've done. I'm sort of staying with presets on my scene here, just so I can have some control and know where my starting point was. So let's take a look at something really quick here. I'm going to get off there. We'll go back to the beginning. Now, you'll notice that this object right here is an nCloth, and it appears that it's a sphere, but it's not. It's actually a cube, and we've just smoothed that cube. And the reason that you start with a cube with an nCloth is so that there's not unwanted pinching at the poles, at either your south pole, north pole, whatever. And you'll notice on a sphere it'll come to one point, usually if you just create a sphere, and that you know, it apparently can cause pinching, so you know, it does have an effect. Anyway, this exercise is sort of right out of the Autodesk book. It sort of just goes through the concept of setting up an nCloth object, and then a plane where it'll bounce on, and some particles that will move into there. So first, let's select the nCloth that I have in the scene right now and take a look at that. You'll notice that it's like a cube, but it's been kind of blown out and stretched. Well, you'll notice that it started as a cube. There's your tabs for its original starting point, and then I converted it to an nCloth, and so now I have an nCloth shape, and that's the overall shape. But with the nCloth, you also have a nucleus, and that has properties as well that control various things. So the important thing here is when you're working with nCloth and the n-dynamic system is that you understand that this nucleus is attached to pretty much the same, you know, objects. So for now, this is going to be the same nucleus that works with the particles as it does with this system. And I know it's a little confusing at first, but I'm going to try and demystify that here. You'll notice that our nucleus has a ground plane, and that's basically an invisible plane right here. You don't see it, but it is there, and things will bounce off of it. If I have my use plane checked here, you'll see where my plane origin is sort of right where it should be on the grid, zeroed out. But if I were to change that ground plane or not use this ground plane, you'll notice that in the simulation the plane is sort of right there. If I don't use that ground plane, let's go back to the beginning, chances are it's going to fall right through. And that's cool because you may or may not need something like that. But in this case, I want it to bounce on this ground plane. And so, yeah. It's kind of cool seeing the particles follow it, and that's because I have a goal attached to this system. And we're going to learn how to do this real quick any minute. But I just want you to see it in action first while I have this open, just to kind of demystify this. So that is your nucleus, and that is your ground plane. I'm going to keep my ground plane on. Now notice that this ground plane has various levels of bounce, friction, and stickiness. Well, in this case I have my stickiness all the way up to 2. So this object as it drops is sticking to that plane. Alright, now I can change that up. Let's say I want a little more movement of this rolling across this plane. I may want to reduce my stickiness here. So if I take that stickiness down to say half, we'll take a rewind and take a look here. You'll notice that you have some control. Now it's starting to roll. All right, and that's cool too. So just one more way to control it, and really getting control of this off the bat and understanding which properties you're messing with. You really have to think about what you're doing. So anyway, that's that. You could put the bounce up. Right now I have this nCloth object, which is it's a water balloon preset. Now with water inside of here, that's an incredible amount of calculations Maya needs to have in order to process this correctly. So you would compound that greatly if you were to say use the water balloon and pull your bounce way up. You can do it. It may crash. I'm gonna nParticles and doing extreme stuff like this can cause the program to crash. It's happened many a time to me. But anyway, you may or may not notice a difference depending on what's happening. But just to be aware of that, you can increase your plane bounce. So at this point, I'm going to take bounce off of the plane and pretty much leave the bounce here on this object. So, and the stickiness factor I might want to bring up a little bit, and we'll take a quick review, and I can live with it like that. So that's cool. Alright, so you get the idea with that. That is working with this ground plane. Now let's go back to the cloth shape for a second here. And notice that the shape also, this object also has bounce, friction, and stickiness. So you could increase its bounciness by just moving this up. You could increase the friction of the outer portion of this cloth, and if you increase the friction, it's going to stick more to the plane. So you sort of have to play around with those a lot as you're getting started. So start out with your default settings here, mess around with your bounce and your stickiness, and that's that. All right, now it's good to have the the outliner open whenever you're doing this kind of stuff, because you really want to know that you're choosing your say emitter or your particle as you're working with some of this stuff. So have your outliner up, and we're going to actually go in and create this particle system real quick. So let's do that. I'm going to come over here. I think I'll just start a new scene, and I'm not going to save that. Okay, so here we have a scene, and if we start out real quickly, we'll just create a polygon cube. Okay, now create your cube. Just go to any size you want. Maybe go into your shaded mode. And on this cube, we're going to go into its properties here, and let's just set our subdivisions to 1 on everything here. That just gives us a nice clean 1 subdivision surface, and maybe scale this to let's say we just give it an 8 overall. Okay, that gives us a real good starting point. And you may want to see where this is sitting in space. I like to zero mine out when I'm messing with this stuff, just so I can kind of get that. So anyway, there it is. There is a sphere. I mean, a cube. This will become a sphere very quickly. So with this selected, make sure you're in your polygon menu set and come over to your mesh, and let's just do a smooth. And you should get something that looks like that. So see, it's taking that mesh and wanting to make it look even more like, you know, a balloon or a rounded object. So in order to get this fully round, we want to come in here and we want to set this to a 3. You'll notice that this is the cube shape, but it is now what is known as a polysmooth face 1. Okay, now I know this is confusing, but because we smoothed this cube, it now became something different. So let's just give that a division level of 3. And as you do that, you'll notice that now you have a perfectly, you know, round object. So that is cool, and you can see where it sort of reflects that it's kind of from a cubical origin. So great. Now we've got this object. Let's take a look at, I think what I'll do is just turn on my shading here, and we're going to make this an nCloth object real quick like. So if you go in here, make sure you go back over to your nDynamics menu set, and you want to come into your the nParticles, nMesh, and we want to create an nCloth. So just by default, just go ahead and click that on there, and now we'll have some various options with a preset. So, and you'll also notice that you get a tab up here that gives you your nCloth, and it tells you about that nucleus. So if you press on your presets, come down, and I think we'll go with the water balloon on this one because I've been working with that. I'm going to hit replace. Now if you set your animation to maybe about 500 or something like that, and sort of just go back to the beginning, take a play, all right, it just drops. Well, that's perfect. That's what we want. But we want it to hit a ground plane so that it bounces. Well, what we have to do here, first off, is to, if we want to use that ground plane, we need to activate it into the nucleus here. And you'll notice that by default, it says, you know, the use plane is off, but we want to use plane. So if I go ahead and just click on use plane, and let's just say those are the defaults, zeroed out and 1 there, I'll go ahead and take a play on this, and whoa, you'll notice that something really weird happens. It just flies up into space. Well, that's because there's a interpenetration error now, because that ground plane is now intersecting this nCloth as an object. So the way to get rid of that, there's 2 ways, and you can use either or. You can place your plane origin at a negative value, say like -5. And if you do that, let's rewind, make sure you rewound. And now you'll see it's bouncing. Okay, so it is bouncing on that plane. All right. Now, the thing you have to be aware of here is sometimes you don't want it going below your grid. So in this case, it would just be a matter of, you know, grabbing our objects and moving it straight up a bit, and then coming back into our nucleus and taking that original plane to, you know, its 0 level. So now when you play the animation, you know, it starts out above, yeah, it starts out above there, and you know, you can kind of see what it does on that level. So now you kind of get an idea that it, you know, you can change that level around. So for whatever purposes you need, there you go. All right, let's get on with it. We're going to have to create some particles real quick here, and I think what we'll do is just create some nParticles. So come on up into your nParticles and go to your create nParticles. Make sure your balls are chosen. The check mark is right there, okay? And Yeah, with that in mind, we'll just go ahead and create an emitter. I'll go ahead and look at my options here. By default, an Omni is probably okay for the moment, and 100 and whatever. The defaults are fine, so I'll just go ahead and hit create. And there we go. Now let's take a look at where it showed up. There it is. So click in here and you'll notice that they're in the wrong spot, but it is having an effect. And in this case, we might want to move those particles. So let's just move that particle up and over. Yeah, you can move it to anywhere. It doesn't really matter. And yeah, go ahead and play your animation. And there you go. Now you'll notice that the particles are also sharing the same nucleus. So if I come over here to my nucleus and look at the default values, there they are. If I change one, it's going to change the other. So anyway, just be aware of this, that we now have a nucleus for our particles, we've got the particle shape, and we have the emitter. All right. So I'm going to rewind here, and let's take these particles that are flowing out of here now and attach them so that they are going to be attracted to this nCloth sphere. All right. So let's say we look at a couple of things first on our particles. I want to make sure I do this right. Bring out your outliner, because sometimes you don't want to have your emitter chosen and then choose your cloth. You want to make sure that you're on your particles. And you'll notice that there's a little bit difference, Anyway, you don't want your emitter attached to here. You want your actual particles attached to your nCloth. So do it in the right order. So just make sure you grab your particles first, and in this case I'll grab my nCloth as well and move that out of the way, and we're going to come up here into our nParticles, and we're going to go use the goal option right here. So click your option box there. Sometimes yours might be set, if I reset this setting, you see that you have a goal weight of 5, or a goal weight of 1, or no, it'll be a goal weight of 5. Let's bring that goal weight up a little bit. Let's just give it a value of, say, like 1. Okay, and it doesn't mean much right now. It's just a value, and what it's going to do is just have a value of the goal weight, which the weights do make a big difference in everything that you do in here. So let's just start with 1 and go with that. I'll hit create. Now go back to the beginning of the simulation and see what happens. Okay, so the particles are cruising out, and they're sort of doing what we expect them to do by default. And from here on out, it is just a lot of fine-tuning. You're going to be spending a ton of time messing with the particle rate. You're going to be spending a lot of time with renders and things like that. But let's look at changing this up a little bit real quick. Like, you can have an option to just grab your nCloth and your nCloth shape and just go into your preset and set it to something different. For example, let's see what lava would look like. I'll replace it with lava, and make sure you're beginning of your animation. And all right, that doesn't really look like lava, but right now we're using our imagination as to what this object is going to look like, and then what we're going to replace the particles with later. But anyway, let's switch that back to, say, solid rubber, and we'll hit replace. Now if it goes to solid rubber, kind of has a little bit more of a rubbery kind of look. Yeah, so you get the idea. You can sort of play around with that. Now, once again, let's look at that this object, the cloth object, and go to the nucleus. We can vary the properties of this surface. So if we really want to make it stick, we're going to mess around with its. Oh, actually, no. We're going to go into the shape itself and mess around with its stickiness in here, because we may want to define its properties here rather than let the ground plane do the work. So anyway, let's take its stickiness up a little bit and see what happens. Oh, let's go back to the beginning. And it does stick, but let's make it stick even more. We'll bring that all the way up. Make sure we're back. All right. So we could also bring its friction up or down. We can bring bounce, play around with that, whatever. So what you'll notice here is these collision flags. Right now, the particles are sort of being attracted to the face of the object. And if you were to switch this up to, say, your vertex or your edge, they'll have a tendency to cluster more on a vertex or an edge. And that's pretty much what that means. You know, and you can vary your collide strengths and stuff here, but really it's leave those maybe until you know have a simulation set up that you want and mess around with them. I don't know. It's up to you. Okay, so that is that. That sort of should get you started on creating some particle effects. And remember, you have all your other dynamic properties to play around with on your nCloth. So you could play around with it for a month and still not kind of even have a handle on it. But anyway, that's sort of the concept. And in the end, you should have some sort of gelatinous blob that's being attacked by some sort of swarm of sea creatures. Who knows? So it's about the concept. And that's really sort of what it is. I mean, if you didn't have particles in here, you could almost use just this nCloth and the stickiness of the plane with the right texture to make like lava flowing down, you know, various inclines and stuff. So you can sort of just use your imagination with this stuff. It doesn't have to be underwater, could be above land, or, you know, anything. So there you go. I want to make sure I didn't forget anything, because there is, as you can see, millions of choices that can be made with almost everything that's in here. You can go to your emitter, you can change your speed. That usually has a large effect on you know, how the simulation is rolling. And I might want to change my speed to, like, say 500. And, you know, I might want to bring my particles down a little bit to maybe like 10. And let's see what that does to the simulation. So we're getting less particles, and we're getting, yeah, kind of uneventful. So might want to bring those back up, maybe make it 1,000 or something like that. Let's see what happens there. All right, and they're getting thrust upon there. Now, you can also, when we're talking about goal weights, that's right. This is one more important point. The particle shape and you know, your particle shape. There's going to be goal weight values between, say, your particles and your nCloth. So if you look around for your goal weight, what am I? I'm on the emitter. Let's go to our particle. And here's your goal weight right here. If you look at your goal weight, you might want to bring that down to, say, like 0.5 in here, and you know, mess around with the different goal weights themselves, and that'll have an effect as well. So you might want to put it down to like 0.2. See what happens. No, it's not going to let me do that. Let's go to 2. No, it's not letting me do that. It's just going to take a value from 1 on down to 0.001. So anyway, maybe do like a 0.250. Yeah, so you're going to be sort of dealing with lots of different little issues like this. Especially with your goal weights, because that's what we essentially created here, was a system, and it was all about goals, attaching a goal of your particle. Now, in this case, I may want to come back to my emitter and set, now that I made some changes, things are running a little slow because there's a lot of particles going on here. So I might want to bring these particles down a little bit more. Let's see what goes with that. Okay, so you can see where that makes a difference as well. You can also change, say, the nParticle mass. You can get to your mass values, and here's your goal weight values as well in here. So you can get to that. Where's my mass? Sometimes I like to pump the mass up a little bit, and that will have a big effect on your it'll have a big effect on the effect. Okay, well, anyway, I will find mass, but just remember, you can add more mass to these particles, and there you go. All right, so I hope you end up with something that looks like that or something completely different. And all right, so on the next tutorial, we'll take a look at making an explosion of the inside here where particles, burst this. So stay tuned for that, okay? And as always, thanks for watching. Read a book and get wise, and be a good person, and go out and get some sun today. It's a great day. All right, thanks for watching.